Hello everybody and welcome back to Rokai's Raid Guides. Real quick before we jump into the video, I wanted to make everybody aware of a new perk we have available for YouTube members and Twitch subscribers of any level, where we have dedicated help channels inside of Discord to help you clear bosses more effectively, get personalized feedback, and custom tips more in depth than what the guides can offer. If that's interesting to you, check out the link in the description below for more info, and until then, let's jump into the next guide. Tortos is an extremely fun fight and the fourth boss of Throne of Thunder, and also relatively easy. I think the best way to describe it is it feels like a mini game turned into a raid boss, but in a very fun way with a lot of different surprises in store, especially for my Foji pack enjoyers. Some fun little tidbits in here that I won't spoil for you that are really exciting to enjoy the first go around. We had a blast killing this boss, so let's first jump into what we did comp-wise to make it as easy as possible for us. Starting off with tanks, this could be one tanked in the future, but during progression, highly recommend doing 2 tanks, and then it can be 2 or 3 healed. It is very killable with either one. We opted for 3 healers because, well, honestly, there wasn't much of a damage check at all, and it just felt safer and more consistent. But there will be no issues whatsoever running 2 healers. And then coming down to DPS, you may have guessed it. If you've been through any of the other fights, you know this is going to be the case. Any mixture of DPS is fine, but highly prioritize that AoE damage like we've done on Horadon and also on Council. There is a ton of AoE to do. So LA Shamans, buckle up. This is going to be your raid. As far as mechanics are concerned, there's not too much going on here. The first one is called Call of Tortos. This is the primary mechanic of the fight that almost everything else is based around, and this is that mini-game type feel that I described earlier with where that comes from. So Call of Tortos is very simple. Every 20 or so seconds, Call of Tortos will be cast, and then from behind the boss in this little cave will come 3 whirling turtles. These little turtles spin around the room extremely fast, dealing damage to anybody that it hits and also knocking them up. Importantly, they can be slowed, and you will really want to do so to make this fight much less chaotic and also just making them easier to kill. Most importantly here is making sure you kill a turtle before the next Furious Breath is cast, and we'll talk about that more in just a moment. But important things here, don't get hit by them, make sure they're slowed, focus one down first, then cleave the others afterwards. Once a turtle has been killed, it will then become an eligible target for Kick Shell. That's the extra action button you see there in the top left of my screen, and if you run up behind a turtle, click on it, and then press your extra action button. You can see those green little arrows, and you will actually kick that turtle shell in whatever direction that arrow is facing, which is controlled by your position relative to the turtle shell. Doing this accomplishes 2 things. First, it amplifies damage taken by any enemy it passes through by 50%, so you want to use this to amplify the damage you deal to as many adds and the boss as possible. And second, and even more important than the damage amp, is it interrupts spell casting, which will take us right into the next mechanic of the fight. Furious Stone Breath. Now, this is cast every time that Tortos reaches 100 Fury, which is roughly every 45 seconds or so, and after the cast completes, this breath is channeled for 4 seconds, dealing 350k damage every second. Long story short, it will wipe your raid if the cast completes. So it's extremely important to single target down one of these whirling turtle shells so that you have one available to prevent the cast from completing in the first place. If the boss even gets 1 tick off of that breath, it will likely result in a wipe. Next up is Rockfall. These are the small swirlies that you see on the ground here. If you are standing inside of one of those swirlies when that stalactite actually hits the ground, it will instantly one-shot you unless you have a large defensive up, so make sure you avoid those. The second part of this mechanic is that within 20 yards of that smaller impact zone, it deals about 70 to 80k damage to anybody around it. So healers, this is just passive damage that for the most part will be unavoidable and you'll just have to heal through. Most importantly, is just don't be inside those small circles themselves, or that's going to kill you. Bringing us to the second half of Rockfall, which is how it is increased in frequency. So Rockfall will always just have these stalactites falling from the ceiling occasionally throughout the entire fight. However, after Quake Stomp, the final mechanic of this fight, is cast, then it increases the frequency of Rockfall for the next 8 seconds. So again, these swirlies, Rockfall will always just passively be coming down throughout the entire fight. Once Tortos casts Quake Stomp, that does a ton of damage, and then increases the frequency that the stalactites fall for the following 8 seconds, where then you have to dodge very rapidly. Now I get it. I know what you're thinking. Classic WoW boss filled with mini games. Dodge swirlies on the floor, dodge turtles spinning throughout the room, kill everything you see, don't stand in bad. Now, Quake Stomp is the variable that changes kind of that entire equation and really brings the fight all the way together. So on Heroic, Quake Stomp is an instant one-shot to anybody that gets hit by it. So it deals 100% of your max HP, which brings us into the heroic only healer mini game that now plays a part into the rest of the fight. So Quake Stomp, which goes off every 45 seconds, again will deal 100% of your max HP and cannot be reduced. You cannot reduce the damage that this deals, so you actually have to get a shield in order to survive it. So what they have implemented in order to survive Quake Stomp is really cool. It's these humming crystals that you see around the room. There's like 5 or 6 of them that are targetable. When you hit these humming crystals, you gain a buff called Crystal Shell. Think of it like Spirit Shell, but for everybody in the entire raid, and increases in size from any healing source. So every player in the raid needs to hit one of these crystals. Once you have hit the crystal, you'll gain a buff called Crystal Shell. Then all healing that you receive from your healers will turn into an overshield up to a maximum of 75% of your max HP. Similar to how Horadon works, I very much so recommend the use of a macro, a targeting macro with an instant cast spell, so you can just quickly turn and face one of these crystals and cast something on it to gain that buff to make it as easy as possible. We have found that non-damaging spells do work. So similar to those Direhorn spirits from before on Horadon, things like Purge and Taunts did seem to work on the PTR. We'll see how that translates over on live, but as of this video, and I'll put the macro on screen, this works really, really well. That wraps up all the mechanics that are relevant to the entire raid. Let's go ahead and get into the most boring part of the video, the tank mechanics. Everybody else, skip ahead. Tanks, listen up. For the main tank that is tanking Tortos, you only have one thing to worry about. It's called Snapping Bite. Roughly every 10 seconds this will go off, but it does have some spell queuing, so it could be slightly delayed from time to time. But it deals anywhere from 700 to 720,000 physical damage. So just like many other things, you'll just need active mitigation to handle this, but you don't have anything else to worry about during this fight. So use active mit for Snapping Bite, move on, go next. Okay, off tanks, it is your time to shine. Your entire job on this fight is ad control. About a minute into the fight, and then every 45 seconds thereafter, a wave of bats will be spawned from the boss. These need to be picked up and tanked for the entire time that they are alive, and they are extremely important to kill. Your DPS will actually be helping you with this. You can see the LA Shaman Chain Lightning going crazy right now. They only have one mechanic that they will do, and it's called Drain the Weak. The way this works is that if a bat attacks you when you have less than 550,000 current HP, they will then basically lifesteal off of you and heal for 50 times the damage that you take. So the easy way to explain this is if you don't have one of those overshields and you're not above 550k HP, those ads are never going to die. They're just going to constantly be healing near full health. So healers, it's important to keep them above that 550k threshold. Off tanks, it's also extremely important to continue to grab that spirit shell effect from those humming crystals to make it even easier so you're not constantly dropping below that and having those bats heal off of you. With mechanics out of the way, let's jump into strategy. So on pole, you just have a little bit of time where it's pure single target on the boss. Absolutely send cooldowns for all DPS here, but importantly, make sure you save Lust for the end of the fight, and we'll talk more about that in just a moment. Second thing is a just small maximization that you can do is take a little bit of damage, like 2 to 5% of your health, then click one of these crystals to start getting a shell so that smart healing is able to target you still. Then when this first wave of turtles spawns, make sure you get the strongest slow you have available in your raid on those and kill whichever one comes out first as quickly as possible and save that shell. Once you have that first turtle dead, cleave down the other two, and Furious Breath is about to come up in 2 seconds. That first turtle that you killed, you're going to kick straight through the boss while it's prepping that cast to interrupt it, and this is when the boss is going to start taking that 50% increased damage. So, responsibilities here. Those turtles are going to be 99% a range DPS job. It is way too difficult and chaotic for your melee players to be chasing these out the room, and just not optimal. So your range players will be focused on the turtles, your melee players, and then after the turtles are dead, your ranged players as well will be focused on the bats. So your priority for this fight is range DPS, always on the turtles first until they're dead. Then range DPS, once the turtles are dead, you will move to the bats. Once the bats are dead, you're moving on to the boss. Melee DPS, you are bats as your number one priority, and if those are not up, then you're just on the boss. So second thing here, as each wave of turtles comes out, this is where you can begin to optimize boss damage. What you'll want to do is always make sure you have one world turtle down and eligible to be kicked through the boss. However, after that, any extra turtles that you have up, you're going to want to do 2 things with. One is obviously hit it into the boss, but second is line it up in a way so that you can kick them straight through any other adds that are up. So in a perfect world, what you'll do is you'll take any extra turtles that you have after you have interrupted a breath, and then you will send it through any active adds that are still up. So that would be world turtles as well as bats. So for our off tank, perfect positioning for you is if you can put the bats basically directly in front of Tortos. That way, whichever range player you have assigned to moving around the room and kicking these turtle shells, just like you see here, has a really easy time. One kick, it went through all of the new turtles at spawn, so they're taking 50% increased damage. It went through all of the bats, so they're taking 50% increased damage. And it went through Tortos, so he's taking 50% increased damage. In a perfect world, that's how it should look every single time. This is going to make the fight infinitely easier. If you can only manage to do one thing, though, it has to be interrupting Furious Breath. That's the only thing that can actually wipe you. The others are just going to make your life a little bit easier. Once your assigned players become proficient in the ways of the Ninja Turtle, this fight actually gets really easy because you'll often have a damage amp on most of the adds and the boss. So the most important part from here is after each Quake Stomp goes out and your overshield goes away from Crystal Shell, you'll want your healers to get everybody back to about 95% HP or so, and then have everybody in the raid target that humming crystal and grab a new crystal shell buff. Healers, once everybody has their buff, you'll spend the next 30 seconds ramping up this shield on them. So as a reminder, any heals cast on players with the crystal shell will be converted into an overshield. And then this Weakaura that you see on screen right now, for healers, it will show you once you've maxed out somebody's shell so that you can then move on to the next person. Your goal is to get everybody to that 75% maximum shield before the next Quake Stomp goes out to make it really, really safe and not have to worry about anything at all. Once you've successfully done that entire loop one time of kill the whirling turtles, interrupt Furious Breath with a turtle, add as many damage amps through these bats and the boss as possible, and then survive one of the Quake Stomps and then the ensuing swirly typhoon craziness, you've really done the entire fight, because the cadence of it doesn't change at all. You'll just continue to rinse and repeat for the remainder of the fight. The only true difficulty comes in if you start to fall behind on adds. So I can't stress this enough. There's not really a damage check on the boss. It's all about making sure you don't fall behind on adds. So if you have the ability to do so, build as much cleave into your DPS comp as possible, and just make sure the bats and those small turtles are always your number one priority, and then have any extra damage left over go into the boss. So skipping ahead a little bit in the video for you, once you get the boss somewhere between 20 to 25% HP, you are now going to completely switch up your strategy. From this point forward, you will bloodlust and ignore all the adds. So you're going to just kick a shell through the boss to get that damage amp, pop lust, and ignore anything else that's happening. The only thing you have to make sure of is either A, you beat the next Furious Breath timer, or B, you leave a spare turtle shell down to interrupt that next cast. And that's it. Zerg the boss. Enjoy dodging all 900 turtles that'll likely spawn in this process, and just welcome to the bouncy castle range DPS. Just pray that your melee can play the fight for you, because it gets a bit chaotic here at the end. But truthfully, that's all there is to it. You can see on this kill, it wasn't even close at all in this Furious Breath timer. Perfectly calculated. All right, guys, that's everything I had for you on this one. If you're going to prioritize this in your first couple of weeks, I would say make this the second boss you progress. It's relatively easy, not a ton of mechanics, but it is heavily predicated on how much AoE damage you have in your comp, so plan accordingly. And I'll see you guys in the next one.